My Friday night drive home, a sanctuary of jasmine and classic chrome, exploded when an officer approached, not with questions, but with a chainsaw. The Friday night air was thick and sweet with the smell of jasmine and impending rain as I drove home. It had been a long week, the kind of week that grinds you down, case after case of human misery laid bare under the fluorescent lights of a courtroom. All I wanted was a glass of bourbon and the comfortable silence of my own home. I was cruising down a quiet, tree-lined street in my 1971 Mercedes 280 SL, a car I called Eleanor. She wasn't just a car, she was a time machine. My late father and I had spent nearly 5 years restoring her, bolt by painstaking bolt. The rich scent of the original red leather, the satisfyingly heavy clunk of the door, the low, throaty rumble of the engine, it was my sanctuary on wheels. That's when the world exploded in a storm of red and blue light. My rearview mirror became a strobing nightmare, searing the quiet darkness. I felt that familiar cold knot tighten in my stomach. It's a feeling every black man in America knows, a chilling cocktail of fear, frustration, and resignation. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor or a judge. In that moment, you are just a target. I pulled Eleanor over slowly, carefully, coming to a stop under the amber glow of a streetlight. I killed the engine, rolled down my window, and placed both of my hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread, just as my father had taught me. Don't make any sudden movements. Announce everything you're about to do. Survive the encounter. 2 officers approached, one on each side of the car, their movements synchronized and predatory. The one at my window was older, with a thick, graying mustache, and a smirk that seemed permanently etched onto his face. His name tag read Miller. He blinded me with his flashlight, tracing it over my face, my suit, the interior of my classic car. "License and registration," he barked, not asked. "Of course, officer," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "My wallet is in my left inner jacket pocket, and the registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them slowly." Miller just grunted. I retrieved the documents with deliberate theatrical slowness and handed them over. He snatched them and scrutinized my driver's license, his smirk deepening. "Judge Marcus Thorne," he read aloud, drawing out the syllables with mocking reverence. "Well, well, fancy title. You a long way from your courthouse, aren't you? Judge." "I live 2 blocks from here, officer," I replied calmly. "May I ask why you pulled me over?" He tapped a thick finger on my pristine chrome-trimmed taillight. "This light's out." I knew it was a lie. I checked the lights on Eleanor before every single drive. It was part of the ritual, a habit born from love for the machine, and a deep-seated need to never give anyone a reason. "I can assure you, officer, it was working when I left my office," I said. The other officer, a younger man named Davies, chimed in from the passenger side. "We got an anonymous tip about a vehicle matching this description involved in a narcotics transaction a few miles back. The script was as old as time itself. The broken taillight was the appetizer. This was the main course. A narcotics transaction, in this car." I couldn't help the incredulous tone from slipping into my voice. "Officer, I've been in my chambers all day." Miller leaned in closer, his breath sour with coffee. "That's what they all say. We're going to need you to step out of the vehicle. Judge. We have probable cause to conduct a search." With all due respect, a vague, anonymous tip about a similar-looking car does not constitute probable cause, I stated, the law professor in me taking over for a split second. "You'll need a warrant to search my car." Miller's eyes went cold. He straightened up and laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Oh, a lawyer, are we? Thinks he can tell us how to do our jobs." He looked at his partner. "Davies, I think the judge is telling us he's got something to hide. Something tucked away real good." He walked back to his patrol car, and I felt a fresh wave of dread wash over me. This wasn't a normal traffic stop. This was a power play. Miller was enjoying this. He popped the trunk of his cruiser and rummaged around. The younger officer, Davies, looked distinctly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Then I heard it. A sound that made no sense. A sputtering cough, then a high-pitched, angry roar that ripped through the quiet night. It was the sound of a 2-stroke engine. Miller walked back towards my car, and the streetlight caught the glint of what he was holding. It was a chainsaw. My blood ran cold. He wasn't joking. He was holding a gas-powered chainsaw, its chain spinning into a silver blur. "You don't want to give us consent, that's fine," Miller snarled over the deafening noise, a maniacal grin spreading across his face. Sometimes these classic cars have real sophisticated hidden compartments. In the doors, the dashboard. You gotta peel back the layers to find the prize. He approached Eleanor's passenger side door. The door my father had spent 100 hours sanding and painting to a mirror finish. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Officer, you can't be serious," I yelled over the din. "This is destruction of property. This is illegal." Miller just laughed. He raised the chainsaw, its roaring engine vibrating through the ground, through the frame of my car. Davies took a step back, his eyes wide, but he said nothing. He did nothing. Miller looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of malice and glee. He revved the engine one last time, the sound screaming in my ears. The metal teeth of the chain hovered inches from the gleaming burgundy paint of Eleanor's door. "Warrants for houses," he screamed, his voice dripping with venom. "For cars like this, we make our own doors." The world dissolved into a scream of tortured metal. The chainsaw teeth bit into the steel of Eleanor's door with a horrific grinding shriek that vibrated through my bones and rattled my teeth. A volcano of sparks erupted into the night, illuminating Miller's face in a demonic orange glow. He was laughing, a wild, unhinged expression in his eyes, as he fought the bucking machine, gouging a deep, jagged wound into the car's flank. The smell of burning paint and hot metal filled the air, acrid and sickening. It smelled like desecration. For a moment I was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer, unadulterated violation of it all. This wasn't law enforcement. This was savagery. This was a man with a badge and a weapon, venting his hatred on a piece of metal that represented everything he despised about me. My success, my quiet dignity, my refusal to be cowed. It was all embodied in that car, and he was literally tearing it apart. Then, the ice in my veins shattered, replaced by a white-hot rage, pure and clean. It burned through the fear. My hands, which had been clenched on the steering wheel, moved with a new purpose. I reached for my phone, my movements still measured, still visible. Miller was too absorbed in his destruction to notice. I propped the phone on the dashboard, angled towards the passenger window, and hit record. The small red light was a tiny beacon of defiance in the swirling chaos. He pulled the screaming chainsaw back. The engine sputtered as he idled it down, a hungry growl. A deep, ugly gash, a foot long, scarred the passenger door. The beautiful burgundy paint was peeled back, revealing the raw silver metal beneath, which was already starting to smoke. "See?" Miller shouted, his voice hoarse. "Easy." He plunged the tip of the chainsaw back into the gash and ripped downwards, tearing the doorskin open like a tin can. Metal screeched and groaned in protest. He was a vandal, a common thug hiding behind a uniform. Finally, with a roar of triumph, he switched off the engine. The sudden silence was almost as deafening as the noise had been. The only sound was the ticking of Eleanor's cooling engine, and my own ragged breathing. Miller threw the chainsaw to the ground and used his gloved hands to pry at the mangled metal, tearing the door panel away from its frame. Wires sparked. The finely stitched leather my father and I had so carefully stretched and fitted was ripped to shreds. He and Davies then spent the next 10 minutes conducting their search. They tore up the passenger seat, ripping the leather with a knife. They pulled the carpet up. They shattered the beautiful burled wood of my glove box. They were frenzied, desperate, like rabid animals digging for a bone. With every new act of destruction, Miller's frustration grew. There was nothing to find. There was never anything to find. "Where is it?" he growled, kicking the ruined door. "We know you're dirty. Guys like you always are." "You've destroyed my property based on a phantom tip," I said, my voice dangerously low. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I wasn't speaking to him anymore. I was speaking to the camera. I was creating a record. You have found nothing because there is nothing to find. You are both in violation of my civil rights, and you will be held accountable." That was when Miller's composure finally snapped. He stormed around to my side of the car and yanked the driver's side door open with such force that it slammed against its hinges. "Accountable? You think you can threaten me?" He spat, his face inches from mine. "You're not in your courtroom now. There's no gavel here." And, before I could react, his hand shot out and grabbed the front of my suit jacket, hauling me out of the car. I stumbled onto the pavement, catching my balance. I didn't resist. I didn't raise my hands. I just stood there, my eyes locked on his. "Get your hands off me," I said, each word precise and cold. "Or what? You gonna sentence me?" He shoved me hard in the chest, sending me staggering back against Eleanor's fender. The younger officer, Davies, finally spoke up, a tremor of panic in his voice. "Miller, maybe we should just—" "Shut up, Davies," Miller roared. He turned his full attention back to me. "I think you're resisting arrest." "I am not under arrest," I stated, my voice like ice. "You are now," he screamed. He lunged, trying to twist my arm behind my back. Instinct, pure reflex, took over. I shifted my weight, using his own momentum against him to break his grip. It was a simple, defensive maneuver, something I'd learned in a self-defense class years ago. I didn't strike him. I didn't push him. I just freed myself. But it was all the excuse he needed. "He's resisting. He assaulted me," Miller yelled. A triumphant, wicked lie. Davies, his partner's fear now overriding his own, finally jumped into action, tackling me from the side. The two of them wrestled me to the ground, my face scraping against the wet asphalt as the first drops of rain began to fall. A knee pressed into my back, stealing my breath. I felt the cold, unforgiving bite of metal as handcuffs were cinched around my wrists, tight enough to cut off the circulation. They hauled me to my feet and shoved me towards their patrol car. I turned my head, and my heart broke. Eleanor sat under the streetlight, violated and broken, her door hanging open like a broken jaw, her interior gutted. My father's legacy, our shared memory, lay in ruins on a quiet suburban street. And as the patrol car door slammed shut, sealing me in darkness, Officer Miller leaned in, his face a mask of triumph. "Assaulting an officer is a serious felony, Judge," he whispered, the rain starting to streak his face. "Let's see how that fancy robe gets you out of this one." The ride to the precinct was a blur of concrete and smeared neon lights seen through the rain-streaked cage of the back seat. The plastic was hard and unyielding against my cheek. My suit was soaked, and my wrists ached with a fiery pain from the over-tightened cuffs. Miller and Davies sat in the front, a wall of silence between them now. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of what had just happened. Miller's triumphant glee had been replaced by a grim-faced tension. Davies stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He knew. They both knew they had crossed a line from which there was no easy return. They hadn't found my phone. In the chaos of pulling me from the car, it had remained on the dashboard, its small red light a silent witness recording everything. Every threat, every lie, every shriek of metal. It was my only hope, a digital life raft in the tsunami of their manufactured charges. At the station, the humiliation continued under the jaundiced fluorescent lights of the booking area. They processed me with a brutal, perfunctory efficiency. My suit jacket was taken. My pockets were emptied. They took my photograph, a flashbulb searing a moment of weary defiance into a permanent record of shame. When they demanded I remove my tie and belt, I looked the booking sergeant dead in the eye. "My name is Judge Marcus Thorne," I said, my voice steady. "I sit on the Superior Court bench for this county. The arresting officers are Miller and Davies. They assaulted me, illegally searched and destroyed my private property, and are now filing a false report. I demand to speak with my lawyer and with the station's commanding officer. Now." The sergeant, a man with a face like a worn leather boot, just laughed. "Sure you are, buddy. And I'm the Queen of England. You'll get your call when we're good and ready." They threw me in a holding cell. The stench of stale sweat, urine, and despair was overwhelming. The concrete bench was cold and damp. I sat there for hours, the events of the night replaying in my mind on a sickening loop. I saw the chainsaw tearing into Eleanor's flesh. I heard my father's voice years ago in our garage, explaining the delicate mechanics of the door latch. You have to respect the machine, Marcus. Every piece has its purpose. They hadn't just destroyed a car, they had desecrated a memory. But grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. I focused on the law, on the procedure, on the precise architecture of the case I would build against them. They had lied about the taillight. They had invented a phantom tip. They had no probable cause, no warrant. They had responded to my assertion of my constitutional rights with escalation, with violence, and with destruction. And then, the ultimate perversion, charging me with assaulting them. It was a classic, textbook case of police misconduct, the kind of case that had crossed my own desk 100 times, always from the other side of the bench. Now, I was the victim. I was the defendant. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a guard rattled the bars. "Thorne, you made bail." My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Jessica Riley, whom I had mentored years ago, was waiting for me. Her face was a storm cloud of controlled fury. "Marcus, what the hell happened? They're charging you with felony assault on an officer." "It's all a lie, Jess," I said, my voice raspy. "From beginning to end, they destroyed my car." "I saw the impound report," she said, her eyes narrowing. "It said the vehicle was damaged during a lawful search for contraband. Marcus, my car's in the impound lot as well. I got here an hour ago, and they wouldn't release you. They claimed the system was down, but I saw Miller and Davies in the parking lot. They were with a tow truck driver next to your Mercedes." A cold dread, colder than anything I had felt all night, washed over me. "What were they doing?" "I don't know," she said, her voice tight with suspicion. "It was dark, and they were trying to be discreet, but it looked like they were putting something into your car, not taking something out." The tow truck driver handed them a small, heavy-looking package. We raced to the impound lot. It was a desolate landscape of wrecked lives and broken machines under harsh sodium lights. And there she was, Eleanor, or what was left of her. Her passenger door was a mangled ruin, but now the driver's side door was also ajar. The interior, already a scene of carnage, was even more disturbed. "They came back," I whispered, my mind racing. "They falsified the initial stop, but they knew it was weak. They needed something more. They needed to plant evidence." Jessica was already on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "There are security cameras all over this lot, Marcus. If they did what you think they did—" We ran to the security office, a small shack with a bored-looking attendant watching a tiny black-and-white television. Jess flashed her credentials, her voice imbued with a lawyer's authority that could move mountains. "We need to see the footage from the last hour." Camera pointed at that 1971 Mercedes. The attendant grumbled but complied. He rewound the tape. And there it was, grainy, silent, but damningly clear. The footage showed Miller and Davies arriving in their patrol car. They met a tow truck driver. A package was exchanged. Then, under the cloak of darkness, they forced open Eleanor's driver's side door panel, the one they had left untouched, and shoved the package deep inside. My heart pounded in my chest. We had them. We had them dead to rights. "Print a time-stamped copy of this," Jessica ordered the attendant. "Now." Armed with the new evidence, we headed back to the precinct. I walked with a purpose I hadn't felt since I first took my oath of office. This was no longer just about me. This was about every person who had ever been railroaded by a system designed to protect them. As we walked through the doors, we almost collided with Miller, who was just coming off his shift. He saw me, and a slow, smug smile spread across his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had buried me. "Leaving so soon, Judge?" he sneered. "Don't worry, you'll be back. Once forensics tears that car of yours apart, I guarantee they'll find what we missed the first time." I didn't say a word. I just looked him in the eye and held up my phone, pressing play on the video I had recorded. His own voice, raw and filled with hate, filled the quiet lobby. "Warrants for houses. For cars like this? We make our own doors." The blood drained from Miller's face. His smug smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, primal panic. He looked from the phone to me, his eyes wide with the dawning horror of what he was hearing. He finally understood. I hadn't just been a victim. I had been a witness. He took a stumbling step back, his hand instinctively going to his hip, towards his service weapon. You can't," he stammered, his mind clearly racing for an escape that wasn't there. But before he could finish his sentence, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the tension from behind me. "Officer Miller, that's enough." I turned. Standing there was a man in a tailored suit, his face grim, flanked by two other men in suits who had the unmistakable look of federal agents. It was Chief Williams, the head of the entire police department. And he wasn't looking at Miller. He was looking at me. "Judge Thorne," he said, his voice heavy with a gravity that chilled me to the bone. "I saw your name on the arrest log and came as fast as I could. I'm afraid this is far bigger than just a couple of rogue cops." And he paused, his eyes conveying a depth of trouble I couldn't yet fathom. "The anonymous tip about your car. It wasn't anonymous. It came from inside the FBI. The air in the precinct lobby suddenly felt thin, the fluorescent lights harsh and interrogating. The FBI? My case, a brutal but seemingly straightforward instance of police misconduct, had just fractured into something infinitely more complex and sinister. Chief Williams's face was a mask of grim professionalism, but I could see the stress etched around his eyes. He was a man standing on a precipice. "The tip came from an FBI agent?" Jessica asked, stepping forward, her lawyer's mind already dissecting this new, alarming piece of information. "On what grounds?" "That's what we're here to find out," Williams said, gesturing to the two stern-faced men beside him. "Judge Thorne, I am placing Officers Miller and Davies on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation by Internal Affairs and the Department of Justice. But I need to know everything that happened tonight, from the very beginning." We moved to the chief's office, a space that felt worlds away from the holding cell I'd just left. The video from my phone played on a large monitor, my silent recording now a key piece of federal evidence. I narrated the events, my voice even and measured, detailing every lie, every threat, every moment of the assault. Then Jessica presented the impound lot footage, the grainy black-and-white video of Miller and Davies planting evidence. It was a 1-2 punch of irrefutable proof. Miller and Davies, who had been brought into the room, crumbled. Their blustering denials dissolved into pathetic, self-serving confessions. Davies broke first, blaming Miller's long-standing attitude problem. Miller, cornered and stripped of his authority, finally admitted it all, spitting his motivations out like poison. He confessed he'd been passed over for promotion 3 times, and stewed in resentment. He saw my car, my suit, my title, and his bitterness boiled over into a torrent of rage. But that didn't explain the FBI. The lead federal agent, a man named Carter, finally spoke. "Judge Thorne, for the past 6 months we've been investigating a corruption ring within this department and its connection to a narcotics trafficker named Julian Vance. You presided over his preliminary hearing 2 months ago. I remembered the case. Vance was a slippery, high-level operator we'd been trying to pin down for years. I denied him bail," I said, the pieces starting to click into place. "The evidence against him was overwhelming. And he never forgave you for it," Carter explained. "From prison, Vance has been orchestrating a campaign to discredit the key figures who put him away. The lead detective on his case had his house broken into last month. The assistant DA found a bag of cocaine in her car last week. You are his next target. He has an inside man in the local FBI field office who has been feeding false information to dirty cops, giving them the pretext they need to act." My blood ran cold. The broken taillight, the anonymous tip. It was all a setup, a carefully orchestrated hit on my reputation, designed by a crime lord from his prison cell. Miller and Davies weren't just rogue cops. They were useful idiots, their bigotry and anger the perfect tools for a far more intelligent criminal. They thought they were asserting their dominance over a black man who they felt had no right to his station. In reality, they were puppets in a much larger conspiracy. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Miller and Davies were fired and indicted, not just for their actions against me, but for a pattern of abuse that my case had finally brought to light. The impound lot attendant and the tow truck driver became key witnesses. The corrupt FBI agent was identified and arrested, his betrayal sending shockwaves through the bureau. Julian Vance, already facing a mountain of charges, had conspiracy and witness tampering added to his indictment, ensuring he would never see the outside of a federal prison again. The story, of course, hit the news. It was a sensation. Chainsaw cops and the judge they tried to frame. My face was everywhere. But I refused to let the narrative be just about me. I used the platform they had inadvertently given me. I spoke to the press, not about my own ordeal, but about the systemic issues it exposed, about the presumption of guilt that clings to black men like a second skin, about the absolute necessity of accountability for those who wield power. My personal violation became a public lesson. As for Eleanor, she was a wreck. The insurance company declared her a total loss. They offered me a generous check, enough to buy a brand new, top-of-the-line Mercedes, but I refused. That car wasn't just a collection of parts. She was a legacy. I had her towed to the same garage where my father and I had spent countless hours bringing her back from the dead the first time. The old mechanic, a man named Sal who had known my father for 40 years, looked at the mangled door and the gutted interior and just shook his head. "They really did a number on her, Marcus," he said, his voice thick with sorrow. "Can you fix her, Sal?" I asked. He ran a calloused hand over the gash left by the chainsaw. "Fix her? Son, she's family. We don't throw family away." The restoration was a long, arduous process, but this time I wasn't alone. When the story broke, people from all over the community started showing up at the garage. An upholstery specialist offered to restore the leather for free. A master woodworker volunteered to rebuild the dashboard. A body shop owner from 2 towns over spent 3 weekends meticulously repairing the door, refusing any payment. It became a community project, a collective act of defiance against the hate that had tried to tear us apart. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I drove Eleanor out of Sal's garage. She was perfect. The burgundy paint gleamed, the chrome shone like a mirror, and the engine purred with that same deep, satisfying rumble. She wore her scars not with shame, but with pride. Sal had insisted on leaving one small, almost invisible mark from the chainsaw blade on the inside of the door frame. A reminder, he'd said, of what she survived. I drove her straight to the courthouse. As I pulled into my designated parking spot, the one marked Judge Thorne, I caught my reflection in the window. I wasn't just a judge in a robe anymore. I was a man who had been dragged through the mud and came out the other side, not unscathed but unbroken. They had tried to destroy me, to strip me of my dignity and my name. But in doing so, they had revealed what I was truly made of. They had used a chainsaw to wreck my car, but all they had really managed to do was reveal the strength of the steel beneath.